Welcome to the Republican Professor. I'm your host, Dr. Lucas J. Mather. We're back in Loper Bright in Kagan's Dissent. We're in the slip opinion on page 12 of Kagan's Dissent. And here we go. It's at this paragraph. Let me go ahead and, I think that's big enough for you. That carefully calibrated framework reflects a sensitivity to the proper roles of the political and judicial branches. Where Congress has spoken, Congress has spoken. Only its judgments matter. And courts alone determine when that has happened. Using all their normal interpretive tools, they decide whether Congress has addressed a given issue. This is Kagan's dissent in Loper Bright. We're on page 12 of the slip opinion of Kagan's dissenting opinion. But when courts have decided that Congress has not done so, a choice arises. Absent a legislative directive, either the administrating agency or a court must take the lead. And the matter is more fit for the agency. Let's pause that right here and think about that. I mean, let's really think about this here. Absent a legislative directive, the Article 1 branch takes the lead or the court takes the lead. The matter is more fit for the agency, she's saying. This decision, the decision is likely to involve the agency's subject matter expertise to fall within its sphere of regulatory experience and to involve policy choices, including cost benefit assessments and trade offs between conflicting values. Don't court decisions affect or are affected by all of those things as well? I'm trying to think of a court decision that doesn't involve that stuff that she just mentioned. Is it just me? Is it just me? No? Maybe? Let's continue. We're on page 13 at the top. So, a court without relevant expertise or experience and without warrant to make policy calls appropriately steps back. The court still has a role to play. It polices the agency to ensure that it acts within the zone of reasonable options. Now, how pedantic is this? The court has a role to play. It polices, it's the police, the agency to make sure that it's within a zone of reasonable options. If we trust the Article 2 branch, the agency, to make these policy choices, cost benefit assessments, trade offs between conflicting values, why would we not trust them to be reasonable? And what is the special province of the court if the court has no idea what it's doing in terms of policy choices, cost benefit assessments, and trade offs between conflicting values in being reasonable? What's the special expertise there? Why is the court relegated to just policing a zone of reasonability? And then how is that accomplished? I mean, we're talking about law here, right? We're talking about law. She still hasn't answered if there is no legislative directive, why there would be law there at all. What makes you think there is law there? Let's continue. Page 13. But the court does not insert itself into an agency's expertise driven, policy laden functions. That is the arrangement best suited to keep every actor in its proper lane, and it is the one best suited to ensure that Congress's statutes work in the way Congress intended. Well, I think that Congress really has the burden here, then, right? Isn't that what you're saying there, Kagan? Um, the majority makes 2 points in reply, neither convincing. First, it insists that agencies have no special competence in filling gaps or resolving ambiguities in regulatory statutes. Well, I would say amen to that. Rather, courts do. Score one for self confidence, maybe not so high for self reflection or knowledge. Damn, 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 damn. Sizzling there, Kagan. Of course, courts often construe legal texts, hopefully well, and Chevron's first step takes full advantage of that talent. There, a court tries to divine what Congress meant, even in the most complicated or abstruse statutory schemes. The deference comes in only if the court cannot do so. If the court must admit that standard legal tools will not avail to fill a regulatory silence or give content to an ambiguous term. That is when the issues look like the ones I started off with. When does an alpha amino acid polymer qualify as a protein? Well, if there's not a law about that, then why would you think anybody but Congress could answer that question? I mean, if it's too complicated, why is Congress legislating about this at all? Seems like it's like you just said, it's too complicated. Why would there be any law about it at all? How distinct is distinct for squirrel populations? What size? Again, if squirrels are too complicated, why are we making laws about it? Why? Aren't we biting off a little bit more than we can chew with this regulatory environment? Maybe the government is too big. It's trying to do too many things. What size geographic area will ensure appropriate hospital reimbursement? Again, if this is too complicated for Congress, what makes you think there is a law about it at all? And why would Congress be in the business of making laws that are way above its pay grade to make? Is it just me? You know what I mean, Vern? You know what I mean? We're still on page 13. As between two equally feasible understandings of stationary source, one should one choose the more protective of the environment or the one more favorable to economic growth? Again, again. What makes you think that if it's too complicated, what makes you think there's a law about this? Economic growth perhaps is a necessary condition of protecting so-called the environment. The environment, as if it's just one thing. It's perhaps counterproductive if you trash the society in order to protect the environment. I mean, think about that. Maybe we're trying to do too much here, Kagan. The idea that courts have special competence in deciding such questions, whereas agencies have none, is, if I may say, malarkey. But we're talking, aren't we? Aren't we talking about law? What is the law-making body in the United States? Have we ever talked about this on this podcast before? I think we have. Let me go to Article 1, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a executive branch together with a federal court. Nine, nine, as the Germans say, nine. That's not what it says. Never ask a 7-year-old German boy if he's 8 because he'll say nine and you'll be confused. Like, are you saying you are 9? What? Let me read that again. Article 1, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution says all, not some, all legislative powers in the universe? No. All legislative powers that you could possibly imagine? No, that's not what it says. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. Yeah, that's right. Congress. Last time I checked, Senate is in Congress and House of Representatives is in Congress. That's right. Your congressman could be a senator. That's true because the House of Representatives is one part of Congress. The Senate is the other part. They're both in Congress. All righty. Am I right? Or am I right? Or am I right? Or am I right? You know what I mean, Vern? Let's go back to Kagan, page 13. I'm having fun. What about you? Answering those questions right does not mainly demand the interpretive skills courts possess. Instead, it demands one or more of subject matter expertise. Again, again, again. Congress can subpoena subject matter experts to testify. It's perfectly within the congressional power to take note of congressional testimony and the congressional record. Did you know that the congressional record is huge? There's lots of information in the Library of Congress. There's lots of opportunity for Congress to take note of expert witnesses and testimony in crafting legislation. It's not just the province of the executive branch to have experts weigh in on legislation. It's just that Congress has a unique authority to make the laws. The executive branch does not have the authority to make the laws. Again, Article 1, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution. All legislative powers herein granted. That means the lawmaking powers of the United States herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. Yes, you can testify before Senate as an expert. You can testify before the House of Representatives as an expert, and then they take note, duly noted, and they make a law. It's not that hard. It's not that complicated. Okay. At least not on this one. Instead, it demands one or more of subject matter expertise. Okay, we're on page 14 now at the top. Long engagement with a regulatory scheme. Check with Congress too. And policy choice. Again, Congress, Congress, Congress. It is courts, not agencies, that have no special competence or even legitimacy when those are the things a decision calls for. Second, the majority complains that an ambiguity or gap does not necessarily reflect a congressional intent that an agency should have primary interpretive authority. Makes sense to me. On that score, I'll agree with the premise, says Kagan. It doesn't necessarily do so. Chevron is built on a presumption. The decision does not maintain that Congress, in every case, wants the agency rather than a court to fill in gaps. The decision maintains that when Congress does not expressly pick one or the other, we need a default rule. And the best default rule, agency or court, is the one we think Congress would generally want. As to why Congress would generally want the agency, the answer lies in everything said above about Congress's delegation of regulatory power to the agency. Now, is that, excuse me, pardon me, this might be uncouth to point out here, but Congress delegating regulatory power, is that one of the herein granted legislative powers in Article 1? I think Congress has gotten into a position where it thinks it can pretty much do whatever the hell it wants to do. I think. And what's my evidence for that? Do you want to see some evidence for it? I'd be happy to show you. I'll be right back. All right. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to Introduction to the Legislative Process, which is produced by Congressional Research Service, CRS. Okay, look at this. Are you ready? Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution grants all legislative powers to a bicameral Congress. No. That's false. Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution grants all legislative powers herein granted to a bicameral Congress. That's a huge difference. You see what I mean by the Congress has a self-understanding that's a little bit whacked? They just took out two really important words, herein granted. It's not all legislative powers in existence. It's legislative powers that were specifically granted in the Constitution. For example, the president has the power to veto legislation. That's a legislative power. That's not granted to Congress. It's not one of the herein granted powers. It's not in a Congress. It's in the executive branch. It's in the president. It's not that Congress has all legislative powers. Congressional Research Service, they have only the ones that are specified in the Constitution. That's a huge difference. This is what I mean by Congress thinks it can do whatever the hell it wants to do. Its own self-understanding testifies to that, at least in terms of the Congressional Research Service, which is supposed to be nonpartisan. There's Congress saying we can do whatever the hell we want to do. Okay, so keep that in mind as you hear Kagan whine about the majority opinion here. Uh, the answer lies about Congress's delegation of what makes you think Congress can delegate regulatory power to anybody? That's not in the Constitution. They can't do that. That's not a herein granted kind of a thing. Now, according to the Congressional Research Service, they can because they quoted the Constitution wrong. They just decided to get rid of the language they didn't like. Let's try to do a little bit better job here. Kagan, come on now. Come on. The majority, the answer lies in everything said above about Congress's delegation of regulatory power to the agency and agency's special competencies. The majority appears to think it is a show-stopping rejoinder to note that many statutory gaps and ambiguities are unintentional. Well, but to begin, many are not. The ratio between the two is uncertain. And to end, why should that matter in any event? Says Kagan. Congress may not have deliberately introduced a gap or ambiguity into the statute, but it knows that pretty much everything it drafts will someday be found to contain such a flaw. Given that knowledge, Chevron asks, what would Congress want? The presumed answer is again the same for the same reasons. The agency. Man, she is really, really shilling for the administrative state here. Holy cow. It's almost like Democrats love the administrative state no matter what. And as with any default rule, if Congress decides otherwise, all it need do is say. Well, um, let's see if Loper Bright is challenged by Congress then. Let's see if Loper Bright, if Congress says, ignore Loper Bright, go back to the way it was. Well, let's see. In that respect, the proof really is in the pudding. Congress basically never says otherwise, suggesting that Chevron chose the presumption aligning with legislative intent, or in the majority words, approximating reality. Over the last 4 decades, Congress has authorized or reauthorized hundreds of statutes. We're on page 15 now. The drafters of those statutes knew all about Chevron. So if they had wanted a different assignment of interpretive responsibility, they would have inserted a provision to that effect. With just a pair of exceptions I know of, they did not. Similarly, Congress has declined to enact proposed legislation that would abolish Chevron across the board. Well, again, let's see what happens with Loper Bright. Uh, so, to the extent the majority is worried that the Chevron presumption is fictional, uh, as all legal presumptions in some sense are, it has gotten less and less so every day for 40 years. The congressional reaction shows as well as anything could that the Chevron court read Congress right. Now we're now bumping into Roman numeral II, and I think that that's probably a pretty good place to stop. We have a relatively short episode today. So we're stopping at Roman numeral II on page 15 of Kagan's Dissent in Loper Bright. We still have quite a bit to do here in Loper Bright. A lot of complaining and bitching and moaning, but fun for the entire family. Bring grandma next time. Thanks for joining me on the Republican Professor. I'm still wearing Easter clothes. I got a pastel tie going on here, and I've got a pure wool gray suit on with a 100% cotton light blue shirt. And this, of course, is this tie, I think, is silk. It's made in China. China! Yeah, it's all silk. And it's this nice little yellow, blue pastel kind of a thing. We're still in Easter season. That is until Pentecost Sunday in June. I'm preaching at the church on Trinity Sunday, which is the week after that. Um, I preached on Palm Sunday. We got a long Easter season, appropriately so, and I'm really enjoying Easter. So let's all enjoy Easter. Continuing, it's 6 May 2025. It's a Tuesday, 2025 years after Jesus. We've just finished reading about 2.5 pages of Kagan's Dissent in Loper Bright. The slip opinion, it's cited as a 603rd volume of the U.S. Reports. We don't know the page, 2024, Loper Bright. And we'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks for joining me on the Republican Professor podcast.